but I'll start introducing you to our next speaker. Our next speaker will be Mr. Aniket Sengupta, and his hometown is Kolkata in the West Bengal in India. He has obtained bachelor's and master's degree in botany. He is the recipient of many awards and honors. He's currently a doctoral candidate at the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology at the University of Kansas. He is an admirer of Maulana Muhammad Ali and his English translation and commentary, and we very much are going to be looking forward to his presentation today. And I'll just add that, in addition to wanting to hear about, hear your presentation, you've added this level of energy as soon as you came. So, I mean, it's pretty dynamic personality as well. So it looks like we've got your PowerPoint up, so I'll give the mic over to Mr. Sengupta.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I'm having just a little bit of palpitation because it's my first presentation with a tie. I'm a botanist, so we usually spend a bunch of time in forests and valleys wearing next to nothing in the tropical air. So our presentations are very laid back in terms of our attire. So if my tie does not match my shirt, you have to pardon me, or just ignore that tie altogether. And luckily, I have 2 pointers now. Today I'll be talking about Islam, the theory of evolution, and Maulana Muhammad Ali's scholarship on these 2 very important issues. A main theme for my conversation would not be to somehow come to a strong conclusion, but to somehow open up possibility of conversation between these 2 really important philosophies out in the world. To start, I've lived in this country for half a decade now, and I've been to many different religious organizations, including Abrahamic and non-Abrahamic, and increasingly I see this trend where people are adding new tenets to their religion. So you almost have to disagree with evolution and climate change to be a Christian nowadays. It's not everybody, but this increasing trend to question everything that is coming out of science. It's a joke in our department that your scientific work is really authentic and useful once people start disagreeing with it. So I do have stakes in the game. I study evolution of flower. I study how, this flower shape, round flowers, become things like that. So I study the genes that govern this change and the pollinators and the environment and things like that. So I'm not fully unbiased, but nobody truly is. To start with, I think it will be useful to get some ground agreement on certain issues. When we make statements in our lives, and we all do, there are different kinds of confidence level a statement has. For example, when you have pretty low confidence, you say, well, I'm guessing, I guess they're dating. We don't have an answer to that. But when you have slightly higher confidence, like 10 years back, I would say, it's my theory that the government is spying on me. But now, I would say, it's a fact that the government is spying on me. See the difference? In science, when you have low confidence, we would say, I'd rather not comment on it. I have not seen a credible scientist making a really long statement on something on which they or she had no confidence at all. So they would rather not comment. So I don't have a word for that. But when you have some amount of confidence, you will say it's my hypothesis in science. So you will say it's a possibility. I'm not sure it's true, worth doing an experiment and figuring out if it's true or not. But it's something we might think might be true, might be untrue as well, but some possibility. But when you have a strong conviction of something being true, you call that a theory. So see the conflict here? When in colloquial English we call something a theory, it's like, it's a theory, just a theory, it's my theory. But when in science you call something a theory, that's something that's solid. For example, and I will go to the extent of saying that in science, theory is something that's more than a fact. Fact is one correct information, but in science, a theory is something that encompasses a large number of facts and explains something really crucial about the world in general, the whole universe even. For example, it's a fact that we have seasons. It's a fact that the seasons change in a gradient. It's a fact that seasons are flipped in the north and the south, right? So Australia has Christmas in summer. So whenever it's really hot and humid in Kansas, where I'm from, I say, oh, it feels just like Christmas in Australia. So all those are facts, they're true statements, but they're not scientific theories. The scientific theory would be that the Earth is slightly inclined on its axis, turns on its axis, and that it wobbles a little bit, right, up and down. So that would give you seasons. So a scientific theory is something that's, you have to lie to yourself to decline to acknowledge. So some common theories would be the heliocentric theory, that the sun does not go around the Earth, it's the other way around. The germ theory, that when you sneeze, you have some kind of really unwelcome guests in your body, and it's not a magical being possessing you. These are germs, these are bacteria, viruses, fungi, protists. And the theory of evolution. And again, when I say theory, I mean the scientific theory of evolution. Before we discuss the theory of evolution, it's really important we place some kind of distinction between how science has been dealt with in the West and the East. Science has a long history of being in conflict with religion in the West and the other way around. For example, when the church was at its peak of power in the West, this is what happened, right? Mr. Galileo Galilei got in trouble. But when Islam was at its peak in some parts of Europe and in Northern Africa and in Persia and in Arabia, science was at its zenith. So, and this pattern does not always hold true across cultures and temporal durations. There are some exceptions to that, but religion and science have not fought in the way they have in Europe and its colonies. For example, a lot of science actually comes from the Arabs. The words like alchemy, algebra, alkali in chemistry, admiral in navy, all these are Arabic words. And not only the Arabs and the Persians invented and discovered a bunch of things themselves, they acted as this great conduit for transferring information between the West and the East. So the Arabic numerals are really not Arabic. They are Indians, but they were introduced to Europe by the Arabs, and that's when the Europeans stopped using X's and V's and I's for counting, which is really hard if you're doing a multiplication. So the West in past has had this tendency of questioning science, by which I mean questioning logical conclusions, and it hasn't really stopped yet. So there are people in my state, in the US and across this nation, where people would, if you have a bacterial infection, people would rather not take an antibiotic and go for different kinds of healings. I'm not questioning whether that works or not. But if you see a spider, you can pray for it to vanish. It might work, it might not work, but throwing something at it always works. I've never seen when you try to squish a spider and it did not die. It always works. So if you have a bacteria inside you and you take an antibiotic, it dies. It's universal truth. You cannot decline to acknowledge that unless you really don't want to be honest. So there are tendencies like this in this country. It's surprising, but it's true. So let's see what the Lahore Ahmadiyya movement thinks of these kind of things, and what Maulana Muhammad Ali, and we are celebrating the centenary of his translation, what he thinks of the germ theory over 100 years back. So he says, I'm quoting him directly, the Quran and traditions do not speak of jinn, the genie, as they exist in popular imagination. taking possession of men or women and affecting them with certain diseases. Such ideas are unfortunately associated with the existence of jinn in the Gospels. The stories of Jesus casting out devils are more wondrous than fairy tales. So the idea of demoniac possession to explain a cold is very alien to the Ahmadiyya movement. Ahmadiyya movement for a long time has acknowledged logic and reasoning. So when we come to the last of the three major theories I was talking about, look at this amazing diversity of the best creatures on this planet, including humans. I do not think we come anywhere close to being honest and generous as these creatures. Trust me, I don't have a dog. I don't want one. They're too much work, but they're really cute. Look at this small little nugget here. And look at this one. They're similar. You won't deny that they are not similar, but they're also dissimilar, right? They're different. So a monkey and a gorilla are very similar, but they're also very dissimilar, right? And we know that all of these things came from the gray wolf. And how do we know that? Because we made them. We, over time, manually bred and selected these creatures. Do you think a small chihuahua would survive in the wild? It will get eaten the next day by a cat. So we made these things. We created them by artificial selection. And something similar happens in nature on a different scale. So now that we have talked about evolution from a secular perspective, there are two questions I want to raise tonight. The first question is, are Quran, Islam and evolution compatible at a philosophical level? Not about the nitty-gritty of details. Are they compatible in their basic logic? And the second question then would be, if they are, does the Quran actually talk about evolution? For the first part, let's talk about compatibility. I'm going to quote the Quran right here. Praise to be to Allah, the Lord, Rabb of the worlds. I inserted the word Rabb there, the original Arabic word. Let's see what the word Rabb means. I do not speak Arabic, just a couple of words here and there, shwe, little bit. And let's see what Maulana Muhammad Ali thinks of the word Rabb. The Arabic word Rabb conveys not only the idea of the evolution of things from the crudest state to that of the highest perfection. Rabb signifies the fostering of a thing in such a manner as to make it attain one condition after another until it reaches its goal of completion. By the use of the word Rabb, the Holy Quran thus hints at the law of evolution which is working in the universe. That's not my translation. It's quite heavy and self-explanatory, right? So if we look beyond that, the second argument that I have in favor of Quran and evolution being compatible at a more logical, more fundamental level is that Quran prioritizes logic over magic, usually. So if you read Maulana Muhammad Ali's work, and I'm going to quote him again directly, he makes it abundantly clear. He says, in Christianity, miracles are all in all. The conception of the miracle as given by the Holy Quran is quite different. The means adopted here are an appeal to the reasoning faculty. So you're supposed to use this couple of pounds plus or minus 2 for some people of tissue that you have inside your skull, right? So, and if you do that, it becomes increasingly hard to deny something that's so obvious out in the world, right? So the next question is, if at a more basic level, these two philosophical movements are not at conflict, are they actually actively, in participation? Does the Quran actually talk of evolution? It's impossible to talk of evolution and not talk about the origin of life. The current understanding of life, the origin of life, we'll get to that in a second. But let me start with quoting Quran again. It's well established in science that the first life forms, the first self-replicating molecules started in water. They were not in the clouds, not anywhere else, not in fire, but in water. The Quran says that, do not those who disbelieve see that the heavens and the earth were closed up, so we rent them, so something like a Big Bang. And we made from water everything living, everything, not just humans. Will they not then believe? Let's see what Maulana Muhammad Ali makes of this verse. He says, while this statement reveals a remarkable truth in the physical world, a truth which science has established only recently, and which was not known to the world generally at the time of Prophet, viz. That water is the source of all life. And people, hand wave that often, it's obvious water is the source of all life. We are 70% water, plants are 90% water. But I say, water is not the only thing that you see in life. If you squish an insect, like when you kill that spider, it's a lot of water. But it's also a lot of solid. It's also a lot of warmth. It's also a lot of space. I mean, we have gas in our bodies. The Quran consistently talks about solid like dust and rocks and water as a source of life, not just fire or sky. And you see this pattern being recurrent throughout the book of water being invoked as the source of life, both human and non-human. But it also talks about clay and earth being a source of life, which is apparently a conflict. You cannot you can have two gods, right? You can have both your feet, 2 feet on 2 boats, but looks like there's a conflict there. But let's tease it apart. The Quran says that he created man from dry clay like earthen vessels. And the way we understand the origin of life now, I know this guy, I know Dr. Baum. I applied to grad school for him. He didn't have enough money for me. He works up in Wisconsin, Madison. Well, it's a sad story of my life. Couldn't go to a bigger school, but that's fine. The way, same happened with Harvard. What happened during the origin of life is that things happened in water. You see the blue part is the water, so everything is underwater, subaqueous. And you have solid surfaces. The first replicating molecules were attached. They didn't have cell bodies. They were just molecules like similar to DNA, not DNA, but similar to DNA, just a naked DNA, no cells. Attached to this surface, clinging on. And the first cells evolved when they were trying to spread themselves across this ancient ocean. So these first cells evolved as packets in water. So both the claims of water and soil being sources of life, in a way, are compatible with modern understanding of the origin of life on this planet. And I must say that the Quran is also okay with life being on other planets. That's fine too. You don't have to, you not become a non-Muslim if you believe in that. Well, so I wanted it to be a little fun and a little more awkward. I'm a biologist. I have no sense. I was telling someone, we have no sense of censorship. We talk about intestines while eating food because we work on intestines sometimes. So I wanted to have a funny and little interesting examples to which half of the people in this room are quite literally attached. I'll see how that goes, that joke. Humanity is created of water pouring forth coming from between the back and the ribs. Water here is an euphemism for the literal contribution of a male parent towards bringing a person to this planet. But I mean, if you take this literally, this is incorrect, right? I mean, I think most of us, at least all of us, or I don't know, some combination of those two words, know that it does not really come from there, right? It does not come from between your ribs. It does not work that way. We all know that, hopefully. But that partly is true. So if you know a little bit about human embryology, when you are a little bit fetuses, and I tried not to have images here because people freak out when I'm talking about dissected human babies and bodily organs. So if you have a teeny baby inside a mother, It's a couple of months old, very cute, very adorable. The testes are not really outside. They're somewhere near the kidneys. I mean, if you're a doctor here, there are at least a couple who are trying to be a doctor and somebody who is already a doctor. They're literally inside the body. And the same thing happens with women. Like the female babies, they're inside the body. It's in the last 2 months, like 8th month and the 7th month, when they're abruptly pushed out of the body. And why do that? Why push them out? Why just not keep them inside? The women have them inside. They work just fine. It's because making sperm needs much colder temperatures. As you know, your doctor keeps on telling, do not use your laptops on your laps. The laptops are supposed to be used on laps, but do not use them if you're a man, because you need colder temperature to be functional as a man. So you don't want the whole blast of heat from your core inside on your organs, so you push them out. But why make this so complicated? Why just not grow them outside as fetuses? We have our eyes growing outside. We don't make our eyes in our lungs and then push them out as babies. We have our limbs working, coming out of our core, not from inside of it. So why make this so complex? It just makes no sense, right? It's just wasteful and at times puts men at great danger of having certain kinds of hernias. So the way the other animals do it is this. If you look into a fish, they always have their male organs inside their body throughout their life. Fetuses, adults, always inside. They live in water. If you look at amphibians, like frogs and salamanders, inside. Reptiles, inside. Some early mammals, platypus in Australia, don't try to touch them because they give off electrical shocks, so be careful. They kind of are cute, but they are quite dangerous too. Platypuses, they have them inside, they're also aquatic. It's the placental mammals like us and the tigers and the lions that they have these organs outside. So what happened was, when we wanted the organ to come out, it was just easier to grow them the way they grow, and then in the end just push it out in the last stage. So if you want to add a second room or modify your bedroom in some way, you don't bring down the whole house. You just move things around and hope your wife is fine with it, right? Or your husband is fine with it. I don't want to be sexist. So it makes absolutely no sense in any other context of making those organs in such a complex and complicated and dangerous way, unless you put it in the context of evolution. We have been doing that for millennia. Our ancestors always, exclusively, had these organs inside, and we were smarter. We said, we want them outside. So we ended up keeping everything, and right before we wanted them to be functional, we pushed them out. So, to summarize, I want to quote this really interesting thing. Darwin published his book in late 1850s. And right after that, within a handful of decades, when some people were criticizing Darwin, they said this. This is an incomplete sentence, but the juiciest part of this statement by this guy called Draper, who was criticizing Darwin, and he says, the Mohammedan theory of the evolution of man from lower forms, or his gradual development to his present condition, is in the long lapse of time. So he was criticizing, ridiculing Darwin by calling his theory, his scientific theory, something Muslim. So the idea of Islam is not, the idea of evolution is not un-Islamic. So if you agree with evolution, I won't use the word belief, it's an agreement to the evidence, you do not naturally become a non-Muslim. It's not like believing or not believing in climate change for a lot of people in this country. It's okay if you are a Muslim and somebody who agrees with evolution. So that's the punchline for today. It's fine. Your faith is fine if you agree with evolution. You don't have to get your placards out and march to the school board and asking people to fire people because they said the D word or the E word in the classroom. To wrap up, if you have any questions, I'm fine to, I'm more than happy to take them, but if not, thanks for inviting me again, and I truly am having a great time here learning all these new things from cool people about cool things. Thank you.